You right? I've got my glasses on. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms Season 1 was brilliant. It was brilliantly shot, brilliantly cast, brilliantly acted. The effects were brilliant, the dialogue was brilliant, the action was brilliant, the characters were brilliant. Even the additional stuff they put in was brilliant, for the vast majority. The sort of flashback episode, maybe a little bit less brilliant, but on the whole, it was brilliant. If you're familiar with the book, though, that shouldn't have come as much of a surprise. Yes, brilliant source material does not equal brilliant adaptation, and if you were surprised by the show's quality, that probably just outs you as a sensible realist. But the Hedge Knight short story is so good that an at least good adaptation was almost inevitable. Personally, it's my second favourite entry in the whole Song of Ice and Fire world, just below A Game of Thrones and above A Clash of Kings. The Sworn Sword, though, the second story in the Knight of the Seven Kingdoms collection, and what Season 2 will almost inevitably be based on, is not that high in my rankings. Can they make a good season of television out of it? I think the best way to do this is just go through all the points that are in the favour of The Sworn Sword and all the points working against it. I'd normally do my quick thoughts on the book here, but that's kind of what the video is, so we'll just skip that. Firstly, and the main thing pointing to Season 2 being good, is Season 1. The first season did so much groundwork and heavy lifting that the second season has already got a massive head start. All those brilliant things I mentioned in the intro just now, the cast, the cinematography, the acting, they have no reason to be any less brilliant in the second season. I have no reason to think the show's budget will be anything less than the first's, and the same people are working on it behind the scenes. It's got momentum, it's got great word of mouth. All signs point to good. Maybe Georgie could even coincide the season premiere with the release of Winds of Winter, maybe? Look, a man can dream. So that's the real world side of things going in the right direction for Season 2. What about the fictional world? Well, to answer that, I need to give you a very brief summary of the Sworn Sword. Sir Duncan the Tall, now travelling with his squire, Egg the Egg, is in the service of a very minor noble, Lord Osgrey. Osgrey's got a tiny little tower, not much land, a bunch of dead sons, and that's kind of it. There's a heat wave happening across Westeros, a drought basically. One day, Dunk notices the river that runs by the tower has dried up, so he rides upstream to see what's going on. He does this with another knight in Osgrey's service, Sir Bennis the Brown. Turns out, the neighbouring noble has dammed the river and diverted the water into her lands. Dunk and Bennis question the workers of the dam, and Bennis ends up cutting one on the face. Dunk then goes to the neighbouring noble's castle. She turns out to be a pretty young woman, and he tries to make amends for Bennis's attack. The Lady Webber, has this big knight in her service called the Long Inch, but he's like not as big as Dunk. Dunk does not make amends or get the river back. Turns out the river isn't even Osgrey's. Turns out Osgrey is a traitor and sided against the crown in the very recent first Blackfire Rebellion. He was allowed to live, but had a bunch of his stuff stripped from him, including the river. Back at Osgrey's gaff, Dunk talks to the old man and considers leaving his service, but decides against it. He knows that Osgrey's sad little rabble of villagers would get absolutely flattened by Webber's army, so things are better if he stays. The next day, Webber shows up at the river with her, little army. Dunk cuts his own face to pay the price, but it is not enough. So instead, there's a 1v1, Dunk versus the Long Inch in the river. Dunk wins, the dispute is settled by Osgrey and Webber marrying, and Dunk leaves after recovering for a bit. End. Oh, and it finally rains again. So that's the story, and something should already be jumping out at you. This is possibly the lowest key thing set in the whole Song of Ice and Fire world. A hedge knight in the service of the most minor of lords in a dispute about the damming of a tiny river. And this being the lowest key story in the whole Song of Ice and Fire makes it incredibly unique. There is nothing like it. The closest thing maybe some of the Arya chapters in Clash and Storm, maybe a few of the Brienne chapters in Feast, and then the previous short story, The Hedge Knight. They're close to the ground and muddy and feature a lot of common folk, but they still all involve like high lords and ladies, kings and queens, and continent-shaping stakes. The Sworn Sword has none of that, except Egg, obviously, but like, that doesn't really count. Getting a never-before-seen look at Westeros is good, I think, as is the focus on the effects of the first Blackfire Rebellion. The Hedge Knight is also set after the first Blackfire Rebellion, but it isn't mentioned at all. It is so suspicious in its absence that it's almost like George hadn't thought of it. The major turning point in The Sworn Sword revolves around the outcome of the first Blackfire Rebellion. We get stories of the rebellion from survivors. I wouldn't be surprised if there were whole episodes dedicated to it, showing the main players, the battles. That would be awesome. And then branching off from the Blackfire Rebellion, and one of those main players is the paranoia induced across the continent by Bloodraven. We've seen him before, Tree Man Beyond the Wall, but here he's in his prime, and he's induced this really unique feeling of sort of unease and fear across Westeros. I'm sure we will get to see him, at least, simply because he's a proper part of the third story in the book, The Mystery Knight, which I'm guessing will be season 3. Another point in the season's favour, the fight against the Long Inch. It's obviously not as visually grand as a Trial by 7, but it is brutally awesome. It is long, it is visceral, and it is in a river, which could do a cool parallel between this and Robert Baratheon's fight with Rhaegar in the Trident. I want to see a whole episode on the fight. I want to see two massive dudes fighting for 40 minutes straight. And then there's obviously the dialogue and the characters and the characterization. That'll all be good because all you need to do is just lift it straight from the book. So those are the points in favor of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms Season 2 being good. Let's look at the points against. I think because we started with the real world positives of Season 2, we could probably look at the real world negatives first. There isn't anything glaring, nothing that stands out, but there is a cynical part of me that just does not trust high up producers and executives. This is like that sensible mindset I mentioned in the intro, having low expectations, and I think there is more risk of having low expectations now with this second season. When these ghouls in suits see a success, when they get their teeth into something, they will ruin it. They are out of touch, creatively and morally bankrupt, determined to save money everywhere while simultaneously bleeding a property dry. I'm not talking specifically about A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms producers, I should say. This is just the very obvious vibe the general public gets from all media executives. I feel like because the first season was the first season, it was a little safer from these types of people. While it was set in a known IP world, it was a new IP on screen. It didn't have the weight of boardroom expectations. I wouldn't be surprised if people in those boardrooms thought it was Game of Thrones Season 9. But because it was such a roaring success, those boardroom expectations will be coming down a lot harder on Season 2. So with those, maybe a few studio notes, maybe a bit of AI usage here and there. Again, I have no evidence for this. This is just a cynical take based on the horrifying state of the world. The showrunners have said the season will wade into politics. That is a little worrying if you ask me. Unless there will be a significant focus on the aforementioned Blackfire Rebellion, I'm not sure how you can shoehorn politics into a story this low-key and low to the ground. Obviously, there is lots of politics involved with the Osgrey character specifically, but it's not really enough to wade into. It's in the background. The politics have already happened, basically. They're not really in motion anymore. So that's a bit worrying, as is the low-key nature of the story itself. I know I just said the low-key nature gives it a unique feel, and it does, but it also results in things being a little boring and a little bare, a little inconsequential. It's very much a minor side quest, like those ones you get in games that are like procedurally generated and you can do them infinitely, as opposed to the main side quest with multiple layers. I am genuinely curious to see how they get anything more than 2 episodes out of it. I'm serious. Other than, as I said before, devoting whole episodes to things that don't actually happen in the story. It's almost slice of life. It feels like something that Dunk would tell another character about, but in a more important story. The Reach, my lord? Yes, my squire and I spent some time there last year. A dispute around a river, if I remember? Something like that. That's not to say it's bad. I mean, I don't hold it as in high regard as the first one or the third one, but this is still a George R.R. Martin joint. There is like a base level of quality that things rarely dip below. It's, I'd say, 6 in my ranking. Below The Mystery Knight, but above Feast for Crows. Yeah. And the last thing working against it is the character of Bennis the Brown. He's the guy who cut the dam builder's face to start this whole kerfuffle. He is very unpleasant. Now, A Song of Ice and Fire is no stranger to unpleasant characters, but all of them have something that makes them either charming in a way, or interesting in a way, or engaging in a way, or mysterious in a way, or hateable in a way. Bennis is just annoying in his unpleasantness and his ever-presentness. In wrestling, there's this thing called go-away heat. It's when a crowd boos a wrestler, but not for what that wrestler says or what they do, like cheating. They're booing them just for being there. They are sick of the sight of them. They want them to go away. So Bennis the Brown has go-away heat from me. Okay, so will A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms Season 2 be good? I'm genuinely on the fence, leaning more to it probably will be good. Season 1 was so good, and that groundwork and that momentum is the biggest indicator to the probable quality of Season 2. It won't just nosedive from brilliant to bad. Even with Game of Thrones, there was an overall trailing off of quality. It trended down. It didn't just hit Season 8 and suddenly become the worst thing you've ever seen. So I can confidently say A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms Season 2 won't be bad, but I am a little concerned. Knowing tendencies of studio executives and boardrooms, and knowing the lack of thickness of the story itself, there is ample opportunity for the showrunners to go rogue. And as we all know, when the showrunners go rogue, only good things happen. Hello! Thanks a lot for getting to the end of the video. Sorry if there's some background noise. It's currently 400 degrees here, so I have the windows open. If you hear someone getting murdered, don't worry, they're probably looking into that. Proper book done. Back to Burning Chrome for that one that's like 7 pages long. And then the fridge. Yeah, the fridge. I'll see you then.